Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound good. How about me?
Yes, perfectly. How about we start with our personal experiences or sightings? I think you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've always, well, I shouldn't say always, but my first experience, I didn't even know, and I still go, I'm old school, I still call it a UFO. I'm
Me
just
too,
going
me
to say,
too.
I can't, UAP, fine, whatever, but to me, it's always going to be UFO.
Yeah.
So the UFO idea, I hadn't even thought of, didn't even know anything about it when I was a young child. But again, if you can forgive me, I'm going to bring my map up again, and it's important because my folks, being educators, they had the summers off, and so the summer, I say summers off, but they did work. But when they finally got to a point where their means were a little bit better, they bought a cottage, and the cottage they bought was up in what they call this the Thumb of Michigan, and the Thumb of Michigan, there's a place up there called Caseville, Michigan, and it's kind of like slightly here, and then there's Port Austin, Michigan, which is right near the tip of it, right near the tip of Thumb. And the reason that's relevant is because it is, I would call it a community of cottages and cabins, getaways. And a lot of the auto workers had places, I would say mostly like the skilled auto workers, the welders, the electricians, the engineers. A lot of them had bought homes and cottages up along in here, and this is like this is Lake Huron up here, and then you got Saginaw Bay. And again, it's one of those things I should have probably tried to get a map up or something, but I don't want to screw anything up in our connection here. But the reason I find that's relevant to this is because back in the 1970s, I was just a young child, so at 8 years old in particular, it was 1975, and I really didn't know. It was 1975. So the reason I keep bringing this up is because we would go up to our cottage, my folks' cottage, on the weekends. We'd go up there in the summers, but on the weekends, unlike it may be like everywhere now, where it seems like populations have grown, this was very, very quiet. I mean, very quiet. Even though there were a lot of cottages, you go along the shoreline and all the places would be dark, and it would be like that basically from what the end of summer, if you will, in Michigan is Labor Day. It's a holiday in the United States where you have a Monday off, and pretty much it kind of ends it's the last big weekend of summer. After Labor Day, this whole area would basically just shut down. All the poor shops, the gift shops, anything up there. It's a very kind of a touristy kind of thing. Everything just shuts down for the season because once winter hits, you can imagine all the water. They basically are getting snow constantly up in there. And even though it's not that far away from Detroit, it's only like about a 2-hour drive, 2.5-hour drive north of the Detroit area or Ann Arbor this way you get up here. It's very, as a kid, it felt like you were going into the wilderness, if you will, or, when you're 8 years old or when I was younger. So we'd go up there, and unlike the summers where just the road was busy and there's people out laughing and having summer good times and boats are out and everything, it literally changes, and you just have beautiful Michigan northern sort of feel to it, and just the nature of the water. And I always loved it because we get up there, and my folks and I would get up, and we would open up the cottage like on a Friday night. It would be kind of late and dark, and just to kind of paint the picture that it just felt like you were on your own up there. And they're seen again in this time in the 75. I know it sounds nutty, makes me feel so old, but we didn't really have a phone year round. All right, we had landlines in those days, and up there, even when we had a landline, it was called a party line. So you actually shared a phone line with all of the other cottages, and so you could pick up the phone and you could hear other conversations. It seems almost nutty to think in these days and age that that's even possible, but you would literally hear people talking, and you'd have to kind of put the phone down, wait, and then, I can make a phone call now because no one's on it. So you do this, so just to kind of paint the picture that it wasn't like today where you have constant cell phone or constant communication. So you really did kind of feel like you were, in fact, I remember, there were a few times where we had to get in the car, drive down to a local phone booth that was literally, it's like something out of a movie. Talk about photographic, I can still picture in my head. photographic imagery. It was a small little phone booth down off this 2-lane highway, and you'd get off, and it was just lit. It only had just a very small dim lit, and if you open the door and then closed it, the lights, these flickering lights, would turn on as you closed the door, and it was like literally something out of movies, you know. And it would be kind of creepy because you'd be in there and it'd be like cobwebs and spider webs, and you know, as a kid, I'd kind of cling to my parents because she'd use that to call my grandma or something and get a call out, but. Again, just sort of painting the picture. It was pretty quiet, but the skies were beautifully dark. That was the other thing too, is the beautifully dark skies. Because down in this whole area, it's all farmlands. There's really nothing. The nearest big city would be Bay City, which is down here about 50 miles away. And so you really did have dark skies, as we would now call them.
No light pollution.
Yes, exactly. It was just, and literally you could go out. There were some nights, you know, when the moon was out, you could literally go out on the front of my parents' cottage. It was a very modest cottage. I mean, it was always kind of, I felt it was kind of modern looking because it was kind of a flat roofed, big picture glass window, but it was really rather old. And, but it was kind of ahead of its time in terms of, I think, the design. And the guy built it himself that my parents bought it from. A lot of the other ones were kind of classic little old houses. But we'd go out sometimes even in the night, or at least I would, and just look at the skies, watch the stars. I mean, you could literally see satellites just laying on, you know, like a chaise lounge. You could lay there and just watch, if, you know, stare up at the sky long enough, because you see just the stars and you see the Milky Way. You know, it's almost reminiscent now. I realize how long I haven't done that myself. And just laying there and watching, all of a sudden you'd find a little light start moving. It would be a satellite. You know, it would freak you out at first. Go, oh my gosh, what is that? But then you realize, oh, you know, and it's a satellite. But, you know, this was one of those times where, I don't know if you're familiar with the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Do you know that story? So again, this is all relevant because the fact is the Edmund Fitzgerald was a giant lake freighter that became infamous from Gordon Lightfoot, a folk singer, actually he's a Canadian folk singer, but he had a very famous song called the Edmund Fitzgerald, and it's based on the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald, which was this big lake freighter that would ply the waters of the Great Lakes, usually hauling iron ore from way up into the Upper Peninsula, is the other peninsula of Michigan. So if you'll forgive me, so it would bring all the Lake Superior up in the north. Lake Superior's up here, and Minnesota. They bring the big iron ore, huge things down to Detroit for the iron mills and the steel mills to make cars. So their waters were always, you'd look out on the lake and you'd see these lake freighters kind of way, way out on the horizon, plying through, you know, storms, if you could see it, and you'd always kind of be amazed. So we got kind of used to that was the fun part of always seeing and watching and looking out at the lake, because this lake, you know, Lake Huron is huge. It goes all the way over to Canada. And so the reason that's relevant is because it had happened on November 10th of 1975. It was a really bad storms, is what you get on the Great Lakes, and they can kind of come up out of nowhere. And they've been this way for centuries, just dangerous, you know, beautiful waters when they are, but boy, when it wants to roar, it roars. And that's what took out the Edmund Fitzgerald. They foundered, I think it was, gosh, I used to be a real fan of this, so I'm mortified that I've forgotten the statistics, but you know, it was a many 100 feet long lake freighter, huge. So when it went down, it was a big deal. And every once in a while, you know, and now that's way up in Lake Superior where that happens. So, you know, they have to come down through what's called the locks to get down to Lake Huron. But eventually they make their way down to Detroit through the water. So you could see them out here. So I was very sensitive, though, I think after it happened, because it just made me feel like, because when you go up there and you felt like it was almost maritime sort of feel, there'd be heavy winds sometimes and big storms. We call them northeasters. They'd come out of the big lake. And the winds would you could lean against it. You know, the winds would just be howling. The waves would be, you know, 10, 12 feet high, just rolling in, smashing into the shoreline. And you get those big white caps. So this was, I want to say, about the weekend after that is what I'm thinking. So I was very sensitive to everything. We were still it was a melancholy feeling knowing that 29 lives all went down, you know, up in Lake Superior. But it was a very melancholy feeling. And I remember just standing and looking out the lake, kind of always being very, and even when I was only 8, I just felt, how sad it must be for the families and that. So, I want to say this was like the Friday night. Saturday we did our. That's the thing about cottages. You're always maintaining, working. I felt like that's all we ever did. People say, "Oh, the beautiful, luxurious life of a cottage." Yeah, as a kid, all I did was paint, scrape, and fix and mow and all kinds of stuff. It felt like, or fix things that were broke, even at a young age. So Saturday we did the chores and all, and then we got to bed. It's always kind of cozy. I think we had started a fire and kind of had enjoyed. It was, you had 2 channels if you were lucky, because we had a big tower. I say a tower like a aerial tower, like maybe about 70 feet maybe high, and you have an antenna with a rotor. You'd turn it and it would slowly turn. You'd use that to try to get a better signal for picking up maybe like we always wanted to get the Detroit channels, but we never did. And you'd have boosters and amplifiers trying to pull it in. But otherwise, you felt very isolated up there. And so we would watch the news that would come from out of Bay City, which was down here, or there was occasionally you'd be able to get the signal from across the water. Was about, this is Saginaw Bay. Across the water was maybe 30, 40 miles. But again, being kind of high up, and you get a signal for watching television in Oscoda, out of Oscoda, which was a town over here across the way. And every once in a while, you might see the lights. It was slightly over the horizon, but you get like an inversion. Sometimes you'd see the lights across the bay. So again, the relevance of that is the fact that, you felt isolated. And so that night we watched a little television, had some dinner, and then I went to bed. And as a kid, I was always kind of wanting to always be up and enjoying the excitement of being at the cottage. So something about being at night. And I was in the back, my bedroom was in the back, and I had fallen asleep. And then I came aware at about, it was slightly before 2 a.m. And there was just a tiny window, a very old-fashioned wooden frame window above my bed area. And the whole room was alight. It was just lit up. And I was like, what is this? It was completely lit up, like daylight lit up. Not just, hey, is there someone with a flashlight? No, it was like lit up. And I poked my head up, and I could not for the life of me, because, when you first wake up, everything bright. My eyes could not. I was trying to stand on my bed to look out. I could not see anything. It was just this brilliant, the whitest light I've ever seen. I mean, just white, white, white. And I thought, what the heck? So I thought, oh my gosh, another ship has gone down, and this is the U.S. Coast Guard out looking for a ship or something. Because, that was my thinking at the time was. So I hurried, I'm scrambling, I'm putting on whatever I could get my clothes on. I ran out, and it was just eerie. Like I can tell you, I get goosebumps now because it's so burned into my head. I ran out. What I'll call the main room of the cottage was just a big room with a big plate glass window, like a big picture frame window, kind of perfectly framed, looking out to the due north, right out to the big lake out here. So you're looking straight out, and it had that almost like an amber look because they had all this pine paneling, so it kind of had a golden hue to the wood, but this white light kind of gave this beautiful amber light feeling I'd never seen before in the cottage. I thought, oh my gosh, this is really something. So I walked out there, and then I looked, and I looked off to, and this would be me looking, and I'm sorry, I'm doing everything backwards for me to give you the right perspective, but I was looking off to the northeast, which is right out to the big lake out here. So I was looking out to this northeast way. And is that right when I say that to you? But I'm at my hand. So there was this giant light, white light. It was, and see, this is where being a kid, as an adult, I would give you a better estimation. But as a kid, I have to rely on what my dad was telling me, because at that point, my dad walks out, and I can picture it because he used to wear a nightshirt. And so he comes out, and he was a 6'2" man, kind of a, if you picture Sigmund Freud a little bit, that's my dad. He was kind of a psychologist. He was a psychologist. Comes out and he's balding, but he's wondering, why do I have the lights on? Like, why did I said, I don't have the lights on. Like, because we had these big floodlights in the front of the cottage that you could turn on that would shine down. And the cottage sat it was a very imposing position. It kind of sat, maybe, gosh, I'm trying to estimate, maybe 30, 40 feet above the water line, because it was up on a bank, and then it was all sand that would kind of go down to the water line. So it had a kind of a commanding position, and the lights, when you turn it on, would illuminate. We had these big floodlights that could illuminate the shoreline and just kind of check. I loved turning those on as a kid because it felt like a command center, and it was just basically two big bare bulbs. My dad thought I'd left the lights on and was like, "What are you doing? You should get to bed," And then he looks out and he goes, "What is that?" And I said, "I think it's a Coast Guard. I think they're searching for a ship. I think something's gone down." And that would happen sometimes. There were boats, not necessarily ships, but maybe boats or something get stranded, especially during the storms. And every once in a while, we would see the U.S. Coast Guard come by in their big, what were those, like H-52s, whatever, those big amphibious helicopters. And every once in a while they'd have a big, what we called the midnight sun. It would be searching. They called them the midnight sun because they would search and they illuminate. I always thought it was impressive when you see it. But I said but even in my dad said, that's no searchlight. And so, he looked, so we had a couch, a very old fashioned couch. It was really uncomfortable, but that's where we'd kneel and look out. So you're basically kneeling on the back of a couch, looking out this this frame window. My dad and I are looking, and we can see this light as bright could be. And it was, and again, I'm going to say it was probably about a quarter mile offshore. And the shoreline, if I can say, would be, every shoreline was kind of slightly scalloped, where you'd have a point, and then it was like a point, and then it would be like this kind of thing. And the points often had the water was more shallow. There was rocks. And the waves, when they would hit, they would be a lot of breakers because it was just more shallow. And as a boater, you always had to be careful to go around these points because it would really get shallow. And I remember the light beaming down on the water, and you could clearly see the white caps, as we call them. The waves were hitting there. So my dad says, "Well, we've got to hear, let's get out there." So he scrambles to get changed. I've already kind of ready to get outside, so I'm finding my shoes because it's cold. It's November, middle of November, and the winds are really howling. And so we grab our jackets, we run out, we go outside, we go down, open the door. And
so it was not in the summer, right?
No, this is November, like the middle of November of 1975. Because I remember, the reason I remember is because the Edmund Fitzgerald went down November 10th. It's like one of those dates that just sticks in your head. And so I think this would have been the following weekend. It was between like a weekend as we approached our Thanksgiving period of time in the United States. It was like middle of November. And so we run out, or I opened the door, and the winds were howling, and we had these old doors that would flap and close, and so you're kind of fighting the wind, and we're off to the side, and we go out into a carport, and then you can walk around the front of the cottage. And as we came around, anytime there was those helicopters, I can't, forgive me, I'm forgetting, like H-52s, whatever they were. They were a big, huge turbo military helicopters, and you could hear those things. They give like a pulsing boom, 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 boom. You knew it, even in high winds. It was nothing but wind out there. Came around, and this is the thing, and I know this sounds nutty. My dad and I stood there, and this thing has been there now probably since I first got up, and now we're doing this. I think we're over 10 minutes now. This thing's been sitting out there, long time. And then the light had slightly moved like outwards, further out. And it was so bright, I kept trying to see what is emanating from this. And my dad could not discern what it was. But I saw and this is where, you go, is it my brain? Is my childhood brain wanting it to be? But I'm telling you, I can only say it was like a dark mass. It was like the light was so strong. It was just literally coming down, but it was also so bright. It was literally a perfect white light. I took my hand and I kept doing this to block the white light so I could see what it was. And then my dad, he got our binoculars. But the ironic part was because it was so darn cold, they fogged like they were the water had condensed or something because they were in the warm and now they're out. And so we'd wipe, and it was almost useless because all it did was magnify the white light. So it really didn't do much because it was just like, so I kept trying to even get them up above the white, but it was just such a brilliant effect. But the silence is what was weird. I mean, you could hear, we had our wind, but there was no sound at all. And then, I said something to my dad. I looked up at him, and at the time I looked up at him, the light went out.
Like how? Collapsed or went away?
It well, see, this is the thing. The light went out. I had looked up at my dad, and I could see his face because we were illuminated by this light. I mean, I should make sure you understand that we were on the middle of this, like I say, these scalloped shoreline. So the point would be, I'm going to say, is probably like 3/4 of a mile to the point, and then it was out probably. So it was, as the bird flies, I'm going to just estimate it was probably about a mile out, like from where we were. And but you got used to seeing these distances, like out to the horizon would be about probably 20 miles, if not maybe more, from our vantage point. So this was off, and the reason it's important because I'd look up, I saw it, and then I knew as soon as I looked up, because everything went dark. It was the normal, and I remember just like, damn, and I looked, and then my dad says it just disappeared. I swear I saw the mass for just the split of a second. I saw the mass, and then I will say it went away, but I think it went out into the lake. Like it went outwards, away from the shoreline into the big lake. Like it was and that's where I go, I don't think it just disappeared. I think it went. Like it went so fast. It was almost, and that's where I'm going to use the word inhuman. It was like, when something is so, like, that's not normal. I mean, it was not a normal. The other weird thing is, I swear I had a feeling, I'm going to call it like a sense of something different. Like, I don't know how to express it. And if I were to tell you how to express it, it's something that almost sounds a little too, I'm going to say spiritual in some weird way. But the reason I bring it up is because I hadn't felt the feeling until my dad passed. And I was with my dad when he passed, and my mom was there and my brothers. And when my dad passed, he was in a hospice, so we'd kind of been waiting for the moment. He was deteriorating, and he was no longer conscious at one point. And just towards like the last few, like maybe about an hour or two before he finally passed, he had kind of come through, and that's another whole thing. But he kind of almost was having some sort of an experience that he was seeing things that we weren't seeing, even though he had been out. And that was like miraculous to witness by itself. And that's another whole story. But he basically was quiet at that point. And then they were talking, and I sensed my dad's passing. Because they were talking, and my mom had been holding my dad's hand the whole time. And then I'm the one that kind of looked at my dad and said, he just went. And because I felt like my dad go. And that was the same feeling that I'd had back then. It was almost that there's an energy. I don't know how to put it. And that's the part that I find hard to put a finger on. I haven't told anyone about that because I've been trying to it's one of those things where you just keep thinking, I hadn't felt it. And it was odd because I felt like my dad and I had always had a connection. So I felt privileged, if you will, in some ways, in hindsight, that maybe my dad did have some energy flow past me. But what's odd is the fact that I had that, it hit me. I went, that's that feeling. It wasn't as strong with the UFO, but there was that weird I can't explain. The only thing I keep trying, I told my wife, I said, it's like that feeling of magnets when you put them opposite of each other, or I'm sorry, like poles, and you can't get them to where you know there's a force, but you can't. It's that feel, but it's like here. It's like in your body, and you can feel. And I felt that ever so slightly with that, and I hadn't experienced anything like that. So now that experience, when it happened, my dad and I sat there quietly and we realized, I think that was not something normal. And then the story continues with the fact that Port Austin had an air base, an Air Force base. It was a radar station, and there was no airplanes or no aircraft there, but it was a part of the, again, this is middle of a Cold War time, so it was, because we're this is the border with Canada, and anything coming from the USSR would be over the Arctic, and so basically this would be part of the early warning system of detecting any bombers that would be coming over the Arctic pole or over the North Pole. And so that was always a norm. And this is the odd thing, is that, again, these are things that I just grew up with up there because we spent so much time. But this radar station was in Port Austin, about 14 miles away. And I don't know if you've ever seen, I think there was some name for them at the time. There was, I used to be really into it. It was like the NH-24 or some, they were these giant 120-foot long, classic, like something you would draw as a kid, classic radar, like you would think of it, 120 feet by, and they were sitting up on these giant cement towers, almost like you would think of like NASA where they built the rockets. It felt that big as a kid. I don't think it was that big, but they were big. I mean, they were easily 150-foot high cement towers, and inside they had it was manned with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, with the Air Forcemen monitoring the radar, looking for any threats from the USSR or bombers, is basically what they were looking for. And this thing swept around, I think it was at least, it would rotate it like 5 times a minute. And this was a giant 100. I mean, it was really impressive because not only did it have the radar, I used to know all the terms, but the horn that would stick out, and these things were massive. And this thing whipping around, I mean, I can't even imagine how many tons, and the balancing that, and then the winds. This was exposed. It's not like today's where they put them inside those white domes. Often you never even see them anymore. But this is where it was fully in the open, whipping around up there. And you always knew when they were on some sort of high alert, or like, because we've got the DEFCON system. I don't know if you're familiar with in the United States. Well, maybe it's a NORAD or NATO thing, but the DEFCON, the defense condition of the United States, is like 1 through 5. 1 is nuclear war, 5 is everything's peaceful. And you always knew when the DEFCON would go up to like 3, because that was the middle, like, we're not, tensions are high, and it would be there for a while. We always knew it because watching television, believe it or not, we would put up, it seems, I can't believe we put up with this, but up there, you'd watch television, but it would just go, I mean, it was pumping out, 5 megawatts of power as it swept. And so your signal, you just got used to watching TV with it was just, in hindsight, going, how did we put up with that? Watching movies, watching Columbo, or any of the shows we'd watch, and you just got used to it. But because so many people did complain, the Air Force had decided that they would go to what they call blanking it, so that as it swept, they finally got the technology, I think, to where it would sweep out over the water. It was on, but as it came sweeping around, any of the land mass where clearly the bombers aren't going to be coming in across the land, obviously, they were able to learn, they figured out how to blank it, so it would turn off the transmitter as soon as it would sweep, and then would turn it back on. But I mean, I had some relatives that were military, and they said that it cost a huge amount of money because you had these giant, there was a lot of money to turn those giant transmitters on and off, and the wear and tear it took to turn that much power on and off 5 times a second every time it would sweep. But they did it because they knew it was driving people crazy. But that was mandated to never be they could turn the blanking off if ever DEFCON was 3 or lower. So if it was a 3, 2, or 1, it was on. So it was always a weird indicator to know that, number one, they would do tests. They would take, because the other thing is Worth Smith Air Force Base was over here in Oscoda. And Oscoda was part of SAC, which was the Strategic Air Command. And that's where our B-52 bombers were always on the ready to go off and bomb the USSR. And so they were literally always on the runways, jacked up, ready to go if they got the word. I think they kind of made pride of the fact that they could be in the air like within 5 minutes or something if ever the call came. And every once in a while, you get kind of as a kid, it was kind of exciting, knowing all this stuff was going on, especially learning it. You start to learn, and my dad would tell me these things, and I'd see the bombers way out. Sometimes they'd fly, and sometimes they would test the radar by flying in over. So my dad did, and that's the reason I bring all this. My dad was thinking, geez, maybe this was just a test. Like maybe this was one of those, but we kept saying there's no sound. There was no sound. This was not a helicopter. Both of us know helicopters, and there was no way this was a helicopter. So, what else would it be? It couldn't be a fixed wing. It had to be able to sit there that long. And so the reason it's also relevant is because, again, at night, they would sometimes turn on the radar to hit, so the blanking wasn't always on because most of the radio TV stations were off the air at 2 a.m. So they would still sweep full around sometimes just to save the wear and tear on the machinery, electronics, and then they turn it back off when they go back on the air around like 5 or 6 a.m. So, but this is the thing: in the morning, it was still going. It was so. That tells me something. Like either they picked up something and they were now continuing to sweep, full sweeps. They weren't turning on the blanking. They were full sweeping even on that Sunday morning. And it was more noticeable because, there'd be, my folks would watch, there was a TV evangelist, or not evangelist, but a TV, like TV church, if you will, that they would watch. And it was doing the thing. And I remember thinking, gee, they normally don't do that unless we're at a heightened alert, or if there's a test. And usually the tests were such that you'd look out and see the bombers or something flying around, or fighter jets over the water. But this is the other thing that was really odd. Is my dad and I said, okay, well, it's getting cold. We're going to come inside. We don't know what we just saw. Clearly something. We're going to have to be talking about. My dad said, you got to get to bed. Classic dad, like your mom's going to skin you alive if you don't get to bed. So we come around, and just at that moment, I heard the sound of jets. And it's not just, and to me, again, it's that thing as a kid, like, it's not, I don't know if kids do that nowadays, but every time if I'm out mowing and I see a plane go over, I stop and stare at a plane. But I'll get a fighter jet around me any day. If I heard that, I was always running outside just to go see it and catch a glimpse of it. I knew it immediately, and I ran out to the front, and my dad said, what? I said, I can hear the fighter jet. So come on, 2 F-106s came flying. I am not kidding. You didn't see it they'd go supersonic once in a while, but they'd be way, way, way up when you hear the sonic booms. And it was usually middle of the day on usually in the summer, or I guess that's what I'm thinking. I hadn't seen it in a while. They were supersonic, and that was 2 a.m. And these guys were hauling butt they came from what would be, I have to think, if I'm looking north, they were coming from the north by northwest, because I remember thinking, normally you don't see the fighter jets. We'd see the bombers from Worth Smiths every once in a while, but you never really see that many fighter jets up way out over the lake. Occasionally you'd see them. These suckers came flying in, and they were clearly F-106s because they have a very delta wing. Those were the interceptors of the time. There was the 87, and the only thing I said is this close relative of ours that was in the Air Force, he had indoctrinated me on a lot of this stuff. So he said, like, the 87th Interceptor Fighter Wing, or whatever they called it, squadron, was up, and it was way up in the UP at Sawyer Air Force Base. See, all these places have been closed, I think, back in the 90s during budget cuts and the close of the Cold War. But I used to know all these places because to me, it was always exciting. But so I thought, oh my gosh, think of that. These suckers came all the way from the UP, which would be, we're talking, what would that be, like 500, probably like 570 miles or like close to 600 miles away. These suckers came in, and now I'm thinking that's about right. When you think about it, in hindsight, my dad and I talked about it the next day, because I said, those two guys, those two F-106s came in, they flew over us, and then you could see them bank, like they went way out over the lake, and the two of them went banking, disappeared for a while. Then they came back again, swept, and then they headed back to the north by northwest. So there had to be something that they picked up. That was the key, is that they had something on radar, and they had to come out and find out what the hell that thing was. And I'm telling you, that to me was I thought that was the evidence of it right there, is the fact that something they didn't like had to warrant sending two F-106s out to go see what the hell is that thing. And the sonic, they were not just, like I said, they were hauling butt. So I'm thinking that's about right, because it would probably be, because I think those things could go they could go Mach 2. And I'm pretty sure that they were probably flying from there. So that's 575 miles. Yeah, that would have been about 30 minutes. In other words, whatever was there, they probably picked it up, and that would have given them about 20 minutes to dispatch a couple. And then those things calling it at Mach 2, they could have made it about that time. So I think it all timed out, because I remember when we went to bed, it was like 2:45 after it was all sort of settled down. And then we talked about it. And from that point on, I was UFO oriented. And then it continued after that. That's the thing. I feel like I've been just babbling at you here now for this time, because there is more to it. And it's to me, it's like it just got me heightened to the whole thing, because I didn't know. Because even then, I think I told my dad, that was the first time I think I'd ever heard the term UFO. My dad, you just said the word, and I thought, what? UFO? What is that? And then I kept trying to remember. Okay, unidentified flying object. I kept repeating, because I didn't want to forget. Because I love that lingo, if you will. Unidentified flying object. Oh, this is wild. And what a story it was too. But that also gave me the idea that people think you're nuts. Because I remember, I couldn't wait to tell like my friends, and man, I think that was the first part. Like, it was literally like on Monday morning going to school and just waiting to walk to tell them, because we would drive back on Sunday night. Completely different reaction, like laughing, that's silly. It just, oh, you believe in little green men, or, it was like that kind of almost getting taunted. And I said, oh, okay. I guess it was like one of those eye openers. And so I can see where you kind of go, yeah, that was the era too, where people were like laughing at you. And so I had the completely opposite feeling. I thought, this is like the greatest thing since sliced bread. This is big news. But no, they thought it was, in fact, like, and a couple of them were a lot more religious. Not many, because Ann Arbor wasn't quite like other places. They had a lot of different religions, but a couple of them were almost a little bit offended. And I remember thinking, like, again, it's like all of this at such a young age. Like, I had no idea this was such a tinderbox. It can go either way. And so that was my opening to it. And like I say, I can share more, but I feel like I've been yakking at you here for an hour already or something. So I hope I'm not boring you with all my side tangents.
All right, I'm gonna share my experience. It's gonna be very quick, and then you can continue with the rest.
Oh, and I'm sorry, gosh, I want to hear yours. That's why I wanted to say. So this is fun.
Yeah, but it won't be, because it's absolutely nothing, especially compared to yours. I think I was 23 years old, driving back from. I'm from the south of France, where the weather is usually clear and good weather. We don't get snow there. What we get is strong winds sometimes, but that's about it. It doesn't get really cold in winter, so usually clear sky and everything. And it was a summer, and I was driving back. I think it was not yet the middle of the night, a little bit before that, maybe 11 or something in the evening. And I was driving on a highway. I was probably all by myself with the lights going along the highway. Both sides forests, nature. And probably the sightings lasted maximum 3 seconds, and it was 3 lights in a triangular formation, but I don't mean to imply
hey, there they are. They're saying thumbs up. You got it.
So I really don't mean to suggest that there were like intelligent piloted, how do you say, drove, but it was just like 3 lights. Probably what I saw, it was very fast in the sky, like 3 seconds at max, and I think it was pretty low in the atmosphere, and probably what I saw was the disintegration of meteorites or something, I don't think, I cannot, it was so fast, and I just looked up quickly and it was gone already. So probably it was just a meteorite, but maybe it was something else, and it was like 3 kind of lights going very fast across the sky and disappear very quickly. That's all I saw in my entire life. I haven't seen anything as interesting as you.
Now, did you have any interest though in the UFO, like even being aware of the topic?
I was 23 years old, so yeah, I always been interested in, what do you say? Not only UFOs, but spirituality as a whole, and I kind of encompass this into this, because there is probably more than just machines flying around. There are probably pilots inside with consciousness and everything. So yeah, I was always interested in all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
See, this is the thing. I'm absolutely convinced of it, because and like you're saying, whether it is something that we, meaning humankind, is potentially doing without, like, right hand not knowing what left hand's doing purposefully. I'm not going to be, I think it. Was it Neil Armstrong? I think it was one of the. I'll be mad if it was Buzz Aldrin, but I think it was Neil Armstrong that famously said that when he was asked, "Do you think there's extraterrestrial life out there in the universe?" He says, "Well, if there isn't, it's sure big. It's sure a big damn waste of space."
Yeah.
I always thought, and he also said it was like the arrogance of. I think he'd also said, it's just the arrogance of humans to think that we could be possibly the only ones, and so I've always kind of had a little bit of that. I kind of appreciate that, but I will say, I do think there's a potential that maybe it stems from extraterrestrial, like the technology. Maybe we did do some recovery or something, that maybe we have expanded or back engineered, and maybe we do have elements of our society, or I say not society, but like of the machine or the secret black operations that maybe operate to test this technology, if we've learned to either manipulate it or emulate it. And therefore these are these moments, like even what I described. Was it hey, let's go test let's see if that radar station in Port Austin can pick us up, if they are outside, I'm not so uncertain that that's not possible. Like, if there is this technology and we have back engineered, and I could see that happening, like, well, it's really, if we're going to use this against the Soviets, we better go check it against our own radars. And so, okay, who wants to take it out? Okay, I will. Then just sit there. Anything yet? Anything? We're here. We took the cloaker off or whatever, and then sure enough, yep, they're picking us up. Let's get the hell out. And I don't know. I can't say that that's not beyond us, because I keep hearing these things about, I don't know. Did you find yourself even after that? Did you get more attuned to paying attention, or would you say, like, did you heighten your awareness of UFO sightings, or just the interest in it, would you say? Or
no, I think that event was really nothing. I mentioned this because we are sharing our experiences of sightings and stuff, but that's all I have, and that's really nothing. So by mentioning it, I really want to say that I haven't seen anything. There is nothing that, I first handed experience. That's really the only thing I saw, and probably my guess is like probably it was just a meteorite. So,
Okay.
so but my interest was always there, and my antennas are always up for that kind of things and others. So if I get my hands on something, I'm gonna study it. And it used to be by waves or by cycles.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I really get deep into it, and I research and I read and I watch videos and stuff. And other times, like I feel that I found everything I could, and there is nothing left to be discovered, and I stopped being interested for a while. But lately, I really think that I had a pretty good understanding of what we can get our hands on. And so it's there, and whenever there is a news, I'm listening to the news, but I'm not going deep like I used to do when I was younger. I'm just 48 years old, but I think I dig as much as I could. And I don't know every cases, but you know, after a while, like, okay, you understood the abduction goes this way and the sightings usually go that way. And you know, sometimes you have a story that is pretty different from what you hear the rest of the time, but most of the time it's always the same thing. So yeah.
Right.
What about you? So you were saying that after 8 years old in that sightings, your interest was really on.
Well, then what continued after that then is because that always made me aware. And of course, at that time, I want to say, was it a year or two later that Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the movie, came out. And I was just delighted to see the scenes one after the other. I still think it's one of the best portrayals.
Me
like
too.
My favorite is the opening scene with the air traffic controllers because of the realism that they put in with the guy, you know, just monitoring what's going on. But then I love it when they realize they've got a potential collision going, and he's, you know, people are redirecting traffic. It's so perfectly done scene, you know, classic Steven Spielberg in the sense of like, and you're my Frenchman. You're my Frenchman from the movie. You know, I'm forgetting his name. That, you know, they based it on a real man. That, I just saw him the other day. In fact, I'm forgetting his. That's what's bugged me. I meant to bring my. Well, I don't even know what I did with it. I had been trying to make a note of some of the names. Now I'm forgetting what his name is.
Jacques Vallée.
Anyway,
I think it's you call
yes,
Jacques Vallée, right?
Say it again. Yeah, exactly. And that's who they had based the character off of.
Yeah. Well,
I mean that definitely. And then but the scene with him with the light with the actor that plays the
I can't remember right now, but yeah.
Yeah, but he, you know, the scene where the light is over his truck, he's the utility worker. That is pretty, you know, to me, that was the scene that and then also the whole thing. I mean, the whole thing is but see, now I know they'll say, oh, and that's what heightened you. And now you're, you know, listen, we were up, I would say I was always looking at the sky afterwards for sure. And then the thing of it is that we would then, I would say it was probably late 70s, because nothing really came of anything afterwards. My dad, I think, had asked around, because he had grown up there, up in that area on the thumb, from a young child up through his high school years and early college years. And so he had like friends up in there, and it's a small rural town, most of them rural towns. And I think he had asked around, and he had found he was curious if somebody at the Port Austin Air Base potentially had seen anything, you know, not that they're going to divulge anything, you know, like he was just sort of casually, I think, and he had friends and I don't even think, frankly, those guys, I think they were on like the grounds crew. they were like the locals that helped. They were probably contracted to work on the airbase. They weren't necessarily airmen, because the airmen, I think, would come and go. And so they wouldn't have had any information. But one of them had alluded to the fact that there had been some like fervor, you know, going on, and it would have probably coincided with that weekend. And that was the other little tidbit of like something, and, you know, again, it could be, maybe it was a military test, you know, like maybe, who knows, but we know what we saw. And if it was our stuff, boy, oh boy, that was quite silent, you know, like it would be, and it was able to hover at the same position without any sound And it was a light like I've never seen. And I can't fathom why all of those things combined would be something they would have done. I don't know. It just seemed, it's just too uncanny. But going forward, watching out over the lake, it was basically, because again, we didn't have much to do except just stare. For me, staring out at the lake was about what all you did at night. If you know, the first time I saw I think what now seems to be, keep hearing about these orbs. I mean, I'm going to call it that, but at the time, we called them dancing lights. I mean, we did not call them orbs, but over the lake, you know, you'd watch and you could see planes, you could see the bombers, you could see stuff, and you knew what it was, and you get the binoculars and you could see it was the classic aviation navigation lights, whatever were going, you know, flashing strobes or, you know, colored lights that were the way they should be on a plane. And then there were these moments where you'd realize, what the hell is that? And then you'd watch it. It would be this, and then it would move. And that was the next big moment with my dad. It was like, again, the same thing. It was like 2 a.m. And I think I either had been staying up late to watch something on TV and fallen asleep and woke up, turned off the TV, looked out, and then I just was staring, enjoying the stars that I could see. But then watching these lights moving like this, just randomly moving around. And I thought, again, it was a reflection. I'm looking for like mosquitoes in the lights, and I there's no lights on, so I don't know how to. Thought it's fireflies. No, it's out there. I woke up my dad, and this would be now like 78, 79, and just to see, you know, and he wasn't thrilled for me waking him up in the middle of the night. But I said, you know, I don't think it's the light. We refer to the light as the light. I don't think it's the light issue, but something else is going on. So he came out. And he was agreeing to me. He says he saw him too, and we'd watch these, and all I can describe would be like this, and they were way out. Like, again, we're talking to the horizon, 20, 30 miles horizon, maybe, and then if they're up in the sky, maybe they would have been 50, 75 miles out, potentially out over the big lake, maybe more. I don't know. You can't really judge distance, but just based on that, again, my dad was a psychologist in his career, but he had a master's in math from the University of Michigan. So he was always doing things and calculating things in his head. So he would say, you know, and this is what he came up with, and I think it's because he was always good at math in his head. He would move, he'd watch it move, and he said, I'm estimating that's moving about 50 miles. Like in 1 second, it would move 50 miles. So he calculated that was 360,000 miles per hour. 360,000 miles per hour it would take to go from, because he was pretty good at judging that kind of thing. Like I always respected, he had a pretty good mind for, you know, judging it. And then he came up with that pretty quickly. And he says, that's pretty shocking. Like, you know, like what the hell could that be? And this would go on for, I mean, we're talking 20 minutes. We could watch these things. And then, you know, it would just sit for the longest time. And then it would just do it again. It would just move. And then it would just move. It was just this constant, and it became almost entertainment. Like we would watch these things, you know, I'll say at least 4 or 5 times in any summer. If it was clear and you could see out there, you could almost see these things. It became almost a routine where you almost got like, oh, there they are again, the dancing lights. And so you'd almost got to this, almost to the, like, oh, there they are again. And it was absurd. And then, you know, we didn't have recording things or whatever to sit and watch it. I don't think it would have told you much anyway, because it was just like these far off white light. Just every once in a while it had that like Mars look to it, where if it sat, it looked like there was a little bit of undulation going on. And so that became a standard. In fact, I think Barbara, my wife, actually had seen it at one point later, because, you know, we'd go up there periodically, even as young adults. And I want to say that she had seen it with me a couple times. And, you know, again, I think she had the same astonishment when you first see him, but then you just kind of go, what do? I don't know. You call and say, hey, what the heck is that? But, because we were cognizant of flares, like if maybe someone needed help on the lake. But, that looked entirely different. You could see it go up. It was an entirely different look. So no one can say it was a flares. You can't say it was a planet. You can't say it was swamp gas. They always give up all these things. So I think there's definitely something technology-wise that and to me, that almost seemed more routine, like mundane. Almost like I think they had something that they were able to either, I don't know if it would be a drone, but even that, I don't know how physically it could go that fast. Or was it multiples and they could just light up? But I don't think it was, because you could actually see them, at times you could actually see them move, and then they would just do it. So to me, it seemed a lot like what you hear what they're now calling the Tic Tac, or the things that they say, would materialize. When they described that, when they showed that, I was so elated when I saw forgetting all these names. We've been seeing them on the news. The naval aviators, man and the woman, that are both have talked about it. That I think that's exactly what we were seeing out there. And given the lake too, you're hearing that they can maybe cross medium down into the water and up. That would explain that as well, because that would have been a good spot out there, and the lake would be the deepest parts of Lake Huron. And then I had another incident here at our house. It was February 2nd of 2020. On my second floor, we've got a window that kind of looks out and way off in the distance, there's a wooded area. And this is fairly populated. I mean, as I call it, a bedroom community. There's a lot of homes in the area, but it's quiet, but it's not like rural, but there are farmlands, and out over the woods in the distance, it's weird. It's always, that time, I think it wasn't as late. It was probably like 11:06 at night. I was coming to bed. I looked outside, and we do have Grand Rapids International Airport, where you'll see planes all the time coming up over our house and over. And so I just thought, it's a helicopter flying off over the trees. But I thought it was a really weird light formation, though. It was a singular light. And what was weird is it was like it was going through the lights of the spectrum, because I kept watching going, I'll be damned. It was like classic, like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, red. It just kept repeating through almost like through the spectrum of the colors and it was just a dot moving along. And I thought, that's not it. I sound like a crackpot. I know it, because I sound like a crackpot. I had that, not just ever so slightly. You just get that, like that feeling. I feel like I get a feeling. And I thought, and this was enough time for me to go get Barbara. And she came over and I said, you see that, right? And it was, again, just moving itself along. And she said, yeah. And I said, I had enough time. I ran down, I got the binoculars, and I was able to come back up and look, and I got a bead on it. I'm telling you, it was like a perfect round sphere. No helicopter, and it was literally going red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and it just kept going through this, like it was like I can only do this with my hand. It was like something like a blob, if you will, but it was moving along, and it was a good 10 minutes, and then it kept going along, and it just sat at one point. And again, it just turned off. I don't know. It just seems awfully strange to me. And so then I came back to the bedroom, and this is the weirdest part, is I looked out our bathroom window, and it was really dark, and it was snowy, and all of a sudden there was this huge number of deer that were working their way out of the woods and coming towards our house. So we're in a subdivision, but that woods is where there are quite a few, I think, deer that just sort of hang out. I think whatever it was spooked them. And they were moved because they looked kind of, I've never seen that before, where it was literally like a whole bunch of deer were not just like grazing along. They were moving away from that area and coming between our houses here, like they're leaving. They did not look like they were in haste, is what I'm saying. And at that time, there's nothing there. There's no cars, there's no hunters or something. So again, put the two and two together. I actually, all I've gotten of here going, great. You took a video of the deer, but not the damn UFO. That I didn't do that because I didn't even think, to be honest, it is weird how I hear why people say, why didn't they grab their phones? I did have time to grab the binoculars because you just want to see what the heck it is, because you're assuming it's a helicopter. It's you're not thinking outside like, oh, until you realize, crap, that isn't normal, and by then it's like, oh shoot. But again, anytime I've ever tried to even do the moon, it looks like just a white blob, at least on my phone. So I figured, but anyway, so those are my 3 stories, I guess you might say, of UFO, and I'm fascinated by it though. And I think the more when I've done the same as you, where you go up and down, like you read about it, but I think 2025 there's something, because I remember that there was the guy from was it either Lockheed Martin or my brain still, I haven't drunk enough caffeine, but there's the Skunk Works, like you got the where they do a lot of the secret stuff. He had said something about, we're going to learn a lot come 2025. And that's always stuck in my head. Did you ever read any of that in your researches or anything like that?
Recently or a long time ago?
Or just even, I had read about this like even years ago. For some reason, 2025 was like supposedly going to be a disclosing year of sorts. And the reason being is because there was something on the books about, in the United States at least, there was something about like every 25 years things can get declassified. And I don't even know where that stems from. I did at one point. I had done what you did. Unfortunately, that's what I think I was mentioning. Like, dang, I wish we could have had this conversation back when I was on top of it more. But it was something to do with disclosure after 25 years, and that something pretty big was going to be disclaimed. Is what he and others, I think I'd heard, were going to, like, we were going to find out as a public more about something that will probably astonish a lot of people in 2025. Who knows? So I'm hopeful that maybe we'll get some answers to some of these things, if nothing else. And
I'm really dubious about announcing dates, because many dates have been announced, like 2012 and stuff. So
right,
what I like to do is, time to time, I like to watch very old videos just to refresh my memory and to compare with what I know now, if there is a change or if there is a consistency. And so many predictions have been done in the past, like, okay, it's going to happen, it's around the corner, and we are here in 2025, and all internet is talking about it, and everybody's like frustrated. When is it going to happen? It's not gonna, probably George Knapp, the Las Vegas-based journalist.
Very much.
I really share a lot of his thinking about it. There will, in my opinion and his, there will not be any official disclosure, at least from those who already know, for sure, with hands-on. They have reasons, and maybe we can talk about that later. As for the other official authorities, such as the government or the members of the Congress, who they don't know much, they don't know they know as much as we do, or sometimes less.
Right.
People like you and me who are knowledgeable because we are interested. It's a good thing that politicians start to be interested and try to push the ball further, but they have a lot of homework to do to really have a wider understand of the whole phenomena, because it's not lights in the sky. There is, as I mentioned earlier, probably the abduction stuff and the cattle and human mutilation and all kind of strange things around it. It's not necessarily all related. I think it is, but not necessary. But they need to know all these different things to have a better understanding what we are dealing with. And it's a good thing that finally politicians start to be interested, but we are very far from knowing the truth from an official body, I think. Although I can be wrong, and I hope to be wrong, but yeah.
Oh, I agree with you on those points. I think again, it's almost like and this will be classic, where if you can record and post this, I love that, because it'll almost be fun to go back and watch. Because what I'm going to say is I just have a feeling maybe we are coming to a head on something. Like, a lot of things seem to be converging, either because we have done things, and I say we, I shouldn't, the powers that be, or the secret powers that don't be, however you want to put it, either they know that they've taken as long as they can and the cat's out of the bag, and they're either going to have to let it out. And I think whether even what we're getting with these, Luis Elizondo and all these fellows that are now coming forward in the congressional hearings, is this all part of like a structured, let's just start putting it out there, let's get the people warmed up on the concept because we've known for 70 years and this could blow economics and theology and all of the things, people could go chaos, but is that part of this where they think this is the way to go about it? I do think there's something, but I think there's something going on. I mean, I think something is in the works. Either, are you familiar with Daniel Sheehan by any chance, or
yes,
Danny
yeah.
Sheehan?
Yeah, the lawyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. See, he's a fascinating guy to me. I don't know. What do you feel about him?
Yeah, I think he's genuine, and he works from. If I have to put sides, he's on the right side, on the good side. He wants things to be disclosed, and he seems also to be aware of the spiritual side and not only the material, physical, technological side, which I'm also on. I like the spiritual side of the things. I'm interested with the machines because probably if we understand and know how to retro-engineer, maybe we can. It can be a positive for the development of humanity if it's not weaponized only. But I think ultimately, from my perspective, the people, if I can so-call them like that, who made those machines are what interests me. The others, us or whatever. Other beings. So, and he seems to be interested with this. So, what do you want to say about him?
Well, he's the one that I guess, and this is where it kind of shows I'm always questioning. I'm always questioning myself and am I being pulled into this? Am I being sucked into that? I feel like I'm always on guard because it does, you always hear about these cults and people that you would swear are so smart and they're, intelligent. They've got, either academically or they just, they seem so level-headed, but yet they get sucked into these being a Mooney or, all these different crazy cults that have come and gone, and the bebop ones with their meteor, and they drink the Kool-Aid to kill themselves and jump on the meteor. All these crackpots, right? But these are, I say crackpots just to dismiss, but the reality is these are people that are smart. They seem like they lived like normal people with really smart jobs, but yet they got sucked into this stuff, and so I feel like I'm always on guard for trying to tell myself, God, is this how it happens? Like you find someone, oh wow, and you get zoomed, like everything he says is true, or so I'm always feeling like I'm on guard, questioning, going, okay, am I getting sucked into something here? So I feel like I'm very skeptical, but I'm open. And I think what I like about Daniel Sheehan or Danny Sheehan, I feel weird calling, he seems like such a distinguished guy to call him Danny, but from what I've seen, and I'd heard about him before and I'd seen a little bit, but I really just lately, I kind of wanted to really dig into finding out more about it. He's such a level-headed guy, or just and I say level-headed in the sense that like worldly thinking, like the kind of person you wish was a president, like someone that's got like they're smart, but they've got this worldly way of thinking that, if this is true, we've got to be prepared. Like, we've got to make sure that like the way he talks, that we need as a society,
yes,
as human, as I love how he refers to the human family, that as the human family, so regardless of our country, as our origins or our religions, that, whether you're a Pakistani or you're a Palestinian or you're an American or you're a Frenchman or you're a Malaysian, we're the human family, and we've got to be prepared to be, part of this galactic organization that's likely out there, and we're, as he puts it, we've got to be making sure we're worthy, that we're not just a bunch of, and I will steal the phrase from, not that I love, the biggest podcaster in the world. What's his name? He's
Joe Rogan?
Thank you, Joe Rogan. See, that's where I'm terrible with names as I get older. He makes references to always like, forgive me, it's like we're just a bunch of like, shit throwing apes or something. Like, even as we are right now, we're still these like, in their eyes, we're probably like these undevolved crude creatures, if you will, right? In their standards. I kind of like the way he says it, because that's how I do feel like, especially when you see the craziness in our news going, yeah, we are kind of like basically a bunch of Neanderthals still, if you will. And in fact, I think I'm dissing the Neanderthals by saying that. But I think, Danny has that way of talking that I think is like, oh yeah, that's the reason he's been in front of the Supreme Court and has argued stuff, because he doesn't really, he has such a good way of just putting things, keeping it in order but yet not being like an egghead to the point where none of us know what he's saying, So
yeah.
I think he's someone that I could probably fall in line with. If he is a cult follower, I could probably follow his orders, thinking he's that, but like that's what puts my antenna up. Go, okay, be careful, because in fact, I'll say Barbara's the one that kind of reins me in sometimes. Like, where'd you get that information? What have you been watching? Like, she'll give me that look of like, what is your source? And it's probably a good thing, because if I wasn't married to Barbara and I was sitting alone, I could be one of those watching, getting sucked into something. But I do think there is a good thing to be skeptical of. He has, and I'm going to share it only because if you do post, I know that he recently had done a podcast with, I'm sorry, but I don't know who all these podcasters are. I'm amazed, but apparently they have huge followings, and they're people, to me, they look like the neighborhood newspaper boy or something, but yet they're apparently big names. And I don't know what show he was on, but apparently he was well enough to be able to get Danny Sheehan. The guy looked like he was not even old enough to work at McDonald's, but not to diss him. You seem like a smart guy, but Danny Sheehan was sharing with him his new ParadigmInstitute.org. Have you heard of this?
Maybe, yeah.
I hadn't heard of that. So apparently he says, and I still haven't gone out and visited it. I just heard it, like, I think it was like a night or two ago, and I keep meaning to go check the new ParadigmInstitute.org that he started, that apparently is trying to help put pressure or build a coalition of people like us that want to go out and try to, tell our politicians, hey, we got to get this, figured out and open this up. And, whether that does anything or not, especially in this day and age, I've lost a lot of faith in a lot of things. So,
I mean, just to further what I say earlier, probably, and many people speculated that in those who know, in the group of those who knows, there are probably one side that wants to keep it secret for reasons, and the other that think, no, that's too big, and we've been keeping it secret for long enough to whatever, and now it's time that we put everybody on board. I think there is that battle. So probably because inside they don't all agree, we might have some leak, and we might have the process that you've been describing, like slowly letting people aware of the things, not to disturb the society too much, but to make people aware and to have a more controlled disclosure. So probably that's going on. But what I meant by my skeptical of having a proper official disclosure is that there is probably that shadow government, or whatever the term. I really don't care about the terminology here. I don't know exactly what's going on, although I have many hypotheses. Is that the word you say?
Yeah, hypothesis. Yeah.
Hypothesis. I think there are many reasons why they would not want the truth to be out. Whether they did something bad, like killing people who wanted to disclose the thing earlier, or whatever, they got so far advanced because of the retro engineering they had, and for some reason they went too far, and it's like a separate society now, and they don't want us to get back to them and stuff like that. I mean, there are so many reasons. So I think it's going to be, nowadays they talk about catastrophic disclosure, in the sense that they will not all agree, okay, now it's about time, let's put step by step the things out there so people understand slowly and at a good pace. So I think it's more like a battle in a battle with some pushing the truth out, but with others trying to
rein it in, keep it, keep the status
keep
quo.
it secret, and sabotage the work of those who wants to, because like David Grush, now he gets,
Yes.
he gets all that bad things around because of what he said, and so there are two things going on, and it won't be smooth and one voice to let the people know, but it will be like, it's already chaotic inside, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's, and this is, it sounds wrong. For folks like ourselves, where we don't really know the face of evil. I mean, when it comes right down to it, we don't know, because we're not evil. And it takes someone who's evil to understand what evil is capable of. And then, like, the sad part is that, like, we can say this because we were using our like normal rational idea that we wouldn't hurt somebody. Even our worst enemies, we wouldn't think of things. Whereas people that have that mindset, I think they could be capable of anything at any time, and they're not going to let go. And they're the ones, though, I think that they're up against. That's my personal feeling. I think there's a guy, do you know Eric and forgive me, it's either Eric Weinstein or Weinstein?
I know.
Do you know him? All right.
Scientist.
I don't know. You see, this is the thing. It's like, I will credit, again, I'm going to credit Barbara for this, because I first heard of him, again, probably some podcast, who knows what on. I don't listen. I always watch YouTube. I don't watch or listen to podcasts, but your YouTube podcast, I'm guessing. And I was watching him with someone, again, I don't know the name. He seemed like another fancy guy or someone that does a lot of good things or has a lot of famous people. I was amused, and I think it ties into this, because Eric Weinstein, whatever, he was describing, yes, and you're right, he's from Harvard. I think he went to Harvard, and I was listening to him, and I was like, oh, man, this guy's great. Just like that Danny Sheehan, I was like, oh, this guy's great. And then you find out later, well, yeah, he's kind of on the like dark science, or there's some science, there's some term like that. He and his brother are both kind of like, in essence, rudely saying, like, I've heard people rudely say, oh, they're both like wannabes, like they're failed scientists who are trying to build themselves up into being these like very academic, thoughtful, big brained guys, yet they kind of are doing it just to keep themselves in the limelight. Or I don't know. I guess I like to think I take people, when I listen to them, that maybe you can glom a little bit of who they are, or that whether you trust them. And yes, we're not face to face, you're not there, but these interviews that you watch, they seem like they're consistent. Like these individuals, to me, like this Eric Weinstein, sorry for screwing up his name, I think he's legit in the sense, like even if he has ego things, all right. My dad was a PhD in psychology. He had a master's in math. He's the guy that you'd like, because he wasn't an ego guy. My dad, all of us have egos, but my dad, was like more, but my dad was around people who had big egos in academia, and they are a force to be reckoned with, because they have big brains and they have it's almost scary. Like, and Weinstein could be in that realm. In fact, I know he's in that realm just from watching him. They it's at another level. And I'm not trying to diss you, because you're snappy, but I'm saying these people are at a different level. I mean, I wholly admit. And he, though, it brings up stuff that he had, and I'm sorry, but I'm bringing up this. Do you know this Epstein or whatever this? He was
scandal.
I hate to say it.
Sex scandal.
Yeah. Yes, or something like that. Or just all the bad things, right? He had some comment in this interview where he met him. And in fact, and the reason I bring it up, because he had a phrase that kind of is chilling, and it ties into what we're saying. And so this Epstein fellow, he had somehow reached out to Eric Weinstein for his mathematical abilities, and because I think he was a money guy, but even that, that's what the thing is. Eric Weinstein had said he didn't think he was. Like, he got to know the guy in this interview, and he was very suspicious. Like, a guy like this, isn't a big money guy. He could just tell he's not the kind of guy. So he really kind of had concluded that he was like a faceplate of something propping him up with all this money, and that even the whole institution of what he was up to was to basically, and this is me paraphrasing, and maybe he didn't, because he didn't come out and say that's what's going on, but I was thinking what he was trying to allude to is that Epstein was like this character that's there to help, whether it be like the intelligence community or get dirt on people, or, you know, like you could have, you know, Bill Clinton or somebody and invite him onto your island and get him caught with something, and now you've got something on him, you know, that kind of stuff, right? You know, where you and I would go, well, who dreams up stuff like that? You're like things you're going, that's evil. To me, that's an evil thing. Like, whoever can think that way, that's evil. And that's what this Weinstein is, that he kind of feels like this Epstein, and this is a chilling way he put it. He says he thinks that Epstein and the whole that whole shenanigans about all that, the fact that he came out and that there was this, and that, you know, he got supposedly killed himself in prison, or, you know, well, Weinstein said something like it's like we saw the tips of the shoes underneath the curtains. Like someone's hiding behind the curtains, and all you're seeing were the shoes that are sticking. Like you walk in a room, it's empty, but there's a pair of shoes behind the curtains of the window because someone's there, and all you're seeing are the shoes. It was a chilling way to put it. Like Epstein was the tip of the shoes. Like there's something. In other words, he doesn't say what it is, but he just says that he just got a feeling like this is like we're seeing something, and you know, and I think that's tied into this, because you figure if you've got something that has been back engineered, or you've got, take someone like that, take people, persons, or one person or persons that think like that evilness, and you tell them, hey, we've got this craft and it's got basically unlimited energy, like whatever it is able to do. You know, it's like they're too probably not even giving a damn whether it can levitate, or they don't care about the technology. They just know that you're telling them it has unlimited fuel or unlimited energy, and it's capable of transmedium transport to go through walls, through the earth, you know, through water. They're hearing power. That's all they're hearing. And that this is what we want. And I'm going to make sure we're going to hold on to that. I have the control over that thing. That's the thing that gets me, is I think that's what we're up against, is that kind of whatever that is. Because you figure, look at the oil industries and, you know, the petrochemicals that are pervading our life and have made such, you know, trillions and trillions of dollars off of us and keeping the status quo. And yet you could have something that, as you just mentioned, the reporter George Knapp.
Knapp, yeah.
In his interview with who's the Bob
Lazar?
Bob Lazar, thank you. See, Bob Lazar, you know, as you start tying it all together, and you say, okay, if Bob Lazar's story is true, or, you know, he's one I take him for his word. I really do. And I think what he saw is what he saw. I don't disapprove. I don't know what your feeling is about Bob Lazar, but to me, it ties into this whole thing. Like even with the Epstein, like all of this, it just kind of like it all is, because you think about that and say, like, you know, Bob Lazar had made allusion to the fact that something like this, he was making something that element 15 or whatever it was, you know, they would have something the size of like your thumbnail, and that thing was able to produce power like beyond anything we were capable of even doing as humankind. You put that in the hands, or tell someone about that's got that evil way of thinking, oh, they're not going to let that out. You know, they're going to make sure that they are in control of that, and they're going to use it to their benefit. And they're also going to make sure that they, you know, make nothing but money off of saying, let's make sure we use every drop of oil on this planet and make every dollar count in my pocket. You know what I mean? Like, let's use it up before we ever let anything else come out. And then let's let them use some solar for a while. Oh, let's let them use some wind for a while. And then make money from that, all knowing that we've been sitting on this for 75 years, the ability to have as much energy generated necessary with something the size of our thumb. You know, I think that's what we're up against. And you know, that's maybe getting too far off in the water, but in the weeds, but I think that's what's going on.
Maybe. On judging people, not credentialed, but what do I want to say? If they're good or bad, you know, you were talking about this guy and that guy that we see on podcast, on internet or whatever, and trying to figure out are they telling the truth or not. I think it's very difficult most of the time. So as you've said, I'm not much into trying to figure out if the guy is honest or dishonest, but I'm listening what he says, and from the information he gives, I try to connect with other sources or other things I have, or even resonate within me. So whether the guy is dishonest or interested, like you know, there is a big what's the word? Oh my gosh, it's much later here, so my brain should be fully working, but it's not. But you know, Stephen Greer, you probably know the guy, and because he's making business and money out of the topic, people don't like him. I don't like the side of him, or I don't like. I mean, I'm not with him. I disagree with his choices to make money and to be paid for presentations around the world, but that's his stuff. You know, I might not like it, but that's not my business. He does whatever he wants. So I don't care if he's a good guy or bad guy. What he has to say, and within what he has to say, what is relevant, what is consistent, what I can pair with other things to get a picture, and what's not relevant and what seems to be false or whatever, you know. So anybody out there, I don't try to understand the psychology of the person, but rather what they have to bring, and I'm judging the information but not the messenger. You see what I mean?
Yes, I agree.
Because trying to know what is behind somebody's mind to say such a thing or to come forward, it's it's almost impossible. You don't know the guy, you just know the guy through a media, and we all know that media, they tend to change reality, not on purpose, but that's the way it is, you know, just like a magnificent glass or whatever. So
you're right.
Having said that, though, I think, same as you, that Bob Lazar is legit. I do too. Sixth sense, or I have the feeling that he's truthful and he's not interested. I don't think he made money out of what he's done, or maybe very little, and he's just a regular guy having his own company, and I think he got more trouble than anything else. You know, he was not looking for fame, and he's still reluctant to go again, tell his story. I think at the beginning he had experienced something so incredible that he had to share it with the world. That's why he made some videos that we can now see on internet, and at that time probably he recorded on a VHS cassette or whatever, you know, and he tried to put everything that he knew or thought he understood out there, and then he didn't want to get anything because he's not even interested in UFO and that kind of stuff, you know. He's just interested in science and what we can do from that crazy science. So I think he's legit, but whatever the opinion, anybody has the right to think he's full of shit. Sorry for the expression. I think he's legit, and I'm very interested with the documentary they are making. I don't know if you know that. I think a Canadian guy, a Canadian team.
Yeah, is it Jeremy Corbell?
No, another guy. He's making so first of all, he wanted to create the perfect replica of the sport model with all the correct dimensions and everything, you know. So he got in touch with Bob Lazar, and then finally they were thinking to make like a 3D. You know, you put those 3D goggles, and you are in the world.
Reality or artificial reality goggles. Yes.
And then finally, now it's becoming a documentary. So I'm very interested because the level of detail, and because they really work very closely with Bob Lazar and trying to get as many detail as he could remember to really put ourselves in his shoes, going through that lab and everything. So that's kind of interesting to have, hopefully, a better understanding of what was going on inside, although we won't go very far as much as what he already said, but at least we will have a visual support for that.
Oh, I think that's fabulous. I really am eager to see that.
Yeah, I would send you the links.
What is your feeling about Jeremy Corbell? Do you know this gentleman? Or you know of him?
I think he's kind of a young wolf. I don't know if that's an English expression. So he's very ambitious, not in a bad sense. You know, he's young and he's passionate, and he learned a lot. I don't know how long he has been interested in the topic, but he learned a lot in a short amount of time, and he had a great mentor, George Knapp. But I think sometimes he gets a little too excited or a little too emotional kind of thing. So nobody is perfect, and I'm not saying that he's not a good guy. I think what he does, he's pushing the ball forward, just like Louis Elizondo in different level, or David Rush, or all those guys you mentioned, like Jesse Michaels. He's one famous podcast. Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe that's why you saw.
That may have been one of those I listened to. There's another guy. Glad to see you're good that you remember these names. Jesse Michaels, I think, was one that had talked that maybe that Eric Weinstein, and then there's another guy that reminds me of, but he always seems to have a young energy drink or something. They always have some sort of commercial, but they all do, I guess. This guy, it seems very polished too, and you go, who are these people? And then there's another young guy that I think a lot of them seem to have like this UFC fight thing commonality. I don't know why, but maybe but this one guy, he's like, really, they're all super smart. Like, it makes me realize how difficult it is doing what we're doing right now, though. I feel like I relate to Jeremy Corbell as I'm speaking, because I feel like him. Like, he gets that same excitement and he wants to jump to the chase, right? Like, I listen to his interviews, and like you're saying, absolutely is not like all the others. Like, I think that's why I relate to him, because he's got that. Everyone else seems like you have that. You have the ability to kind of keep your composure. You're able to talk, and you have the way you're communicating. It has a weight of authority. Whereas I feel like I'm the little, like the high schooler going, oh boy, this is exciting, And I think Jeremy Corbell has a little of that too, even though he's got the meat to be able to do production and such. But I feel like I relate to him only because he's got that. That's how I feel. Like, it get me all excited about that. Like, being sitting next to Bob Lazar would be super exciting. And it's not because, I guess maybe I'm starstruck, but I think it's because he seems like the legit thing to me. Like Bob Lazar, I think absolutely. I remember back when I was in it, and this would be like in the 90s when he was when George Knapp was doing all this stuff. And that's when I was probably at the height of my interest, was back in the 90s. And I knew all that, but there weren't as many either. We didn't have this access to all this stuff, and you had to literally go to the library and you'd blow the dust off of something, and look at it. And it was literally from some guy that looked like he was from like 1942, and he was, pontificating about saying, I think there's a lot of interest going on that I'm excited about where we're at. But, listening to Bob Lazar and this last thing I saw with that Jeremy Corbell, I thought it sounded like he had a documentary of sorts, or I say documentary, maybe it's a highlight of Bob Lazar's existence or life or something. Maybe it's an autobiography, I don't know, or biography, but it sounded interesting. Like, he must have shown it to a bunch of people at something he was doing before they interviewed Bob Lazar. And I don't know if it's out like on Netflix or Hulu, or I don't know. I don't subscribe to those things, so I don't know where those are at, but it was sounding very interesting. And so I think, like you're saying, someone like that, it almost like they seem dispassionate about the ET side of things, which I almost respect. Like, that's not what interests them. It's like they just like the technology. Yeah. And
so I want to jump on something about what you just said. To me, like, on this, if I put that video, it's going to be on I have two channels, as you know, I'm telling for the audience, one for street photography only, or photography in general only, and this channel is all about politics, philosophy, spirituality, and what I call exopolitik. Exo meaning outside, politic is politic. So if we deal with, with something that is not from Earth, this is kind of exopolitik, So, So I try every subject. I try to get at them in the most unpassionate way as possible. Especially this one, because it's already extraordinary by itself. We don't need to be overhyped or whatever. We should, as mature. We are not. I'm always saying in all my videos that our humanity, and I include myself within it, we are immature humanity. But that's okay, because we are on our way, you know. So you cannot blame a kid to be immature. He's a kid, so he's on his way to become an adult and hopefully mature someday. So we are still on a stage of whether infancy or teenage, you know, kind of era. I think that's my point of view. So we need to try to bring ourselves higher on a more reasonable and a more mature and a more wise level than what we are usually, you know. So looking at this topic, we don't need, and I mean, I respect and I totally understand, like when you tell me your story, you saw the lights in the cabin and everything, I really picture it, and I'm yourself 8 years old, like, what is that, you know? So it's perfectly normal, and it's something also to like the child within us is something that we should nurture and keep, you know, and it's very dear to me. But at the same time, I don't know how to explain, but at the same time, there is a balance to have with that excitement and feeling of wonder and curiosity and childness and everything. We should keep that. But at the same time, somehow, it sounds contradictory, but somehow we should also be able to cool down and, you know, get rid of all the disturbing emotions. Some emotions might be useful for the thinking, like maybe fear, or not necessarily fear, but concern and everything, like, okay, that might be dangerous, I should be careful, I should look at this in a careful way and stuff. But all the other emotions that might be disturbing and blinding us or leading us to a certain way, like spectacular side, it's all aside for me. We should really look at this topic like, okay, this is real. Something is happening. We don't know what it is, but it seems to be here, and it seems to have been here for a long time. What is it? We don't need to be like, something's flying in the sky and it's going zip and zap and war. Yes, it does. But like, same for lightning. You know, lightning now we know, we have the understanding what is lightning. You know, back in the days it was like God is angry. But now we understand, okay, it's lightning. Still, it's fascinating. I like to see lightnings. Sure. When there is a storm, I'm at my window looking at the lightnings and stuff. I like it, but on the other hand, I'm not like freak out about it. I know it's explainable. So same with this. Somehow it's explainable. We don't know yet how to explain it, but we should look in a way to be able to explain it and not just to be like fascinated all the time about it. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. What you're talking is a very rational, adult, almost I would say a very thoughtful, cerebral, academic way of looking at it. I think that what you're describing is exactly right. I'm laughing at myself because I'm 58 and I feel like I'm still 8. Like it brings out but what you're saying is completely spot on. That is the right approach. That's the scientific method approach almost. It's the let's be, you know, objective about this.
I'm coming. I'm listening.
Yeah,
I'm listening.
I think be objective is exactly it. Is that Sarah there?
Yeah, that's Sarah. She's always want to let me out, let me in, let me out, let me in. She doesn't know what she wants.
She wants to join the conversation too.
Yeah, maybe she has something to say about it. Back to Jeremy and George. I think it works. You know, there is a chemistry because I do. You know, it's like you and I almost. I mean, of course, they are much more knowledgeable.
No, but you're right. There is the balance of sorts. See, I think it's a good thing, and that's the beauty of this is that I feel very similar. Like I think, you've got a very analytical way of let's be rational about this and keep our emotions in check. And I think, I feel more like the Jeremy side where it's like, oh, this is really big. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. It's a shiny thing. No, I get that. I think you're right. And I do agree. I think I had really admired George. And in fact, that's what's so weird. It's like, I can't believe I'm at an age where I can look back and say, oh, I remember when this was first airing. Oh, I can remember when like this stuff was going on. And part of me thinks that is also part of the, I want to say the silliness of it, but it is almost like, really? I hate to put it this way, but it's almost like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Really, after we're still doing this? Like, I grew up with that. We're still dealing with this. It's like, and it bugs me. Like, this is the sort of thing where you go, and there is a little part of me that says, okay, we've had enough of the academics and all these people that are plodding along. Like, maybe we need something to shake it up. And I will say, I'm not trying to be political, but it's the Trump idea where Barb, and I will go off on each other at times, not because we're so opposed. It's like, it's odd. I think I take your role with her sometimes. She'll be the emotional and I'll be more of the rational, saying, look, I kind of understand. I'm not saying it's right, but I understand where people are liking the fact that he's finally doing stuff. It may not be right, but my God, we've been doing it the other way for a long time and we're plodding along. We're still where we are 75 years later or whatever, so I kind of feel the same about this. It's sort of like, we kind of need the human hand grenade or something that's just going to, like, let's blow this thing up and just see what happens. And I don't know. Although there's danger in that, I realize, and there's an irrationalness that then ends up maybe going the wrong direction. So that it comes back to, like you say, it's the little kid in you that says, I want it now. I want, I want the damn. But I do think this has been going on an awful long time, and and I guess you do. It's almost like, I'm sure the people that are in, forgive me if I just knocked that, people that are in positions of power and such, I got to believe that they could see or hear us and probably go, God, what it must be like to be in the cheap seats. Like, it's like, imagine what they have to deal with. Like, when you think of, hey, I need you to create, like back in 1962, someone comes to me and says, I need you to create a fighter that's also a bomber, but it flies at just slightly under supersonic speed and has a 1,500 or a 5,000 mile range on it, and it can't be seen by radar. Can you get that done for us? Like, imagine being tasked with going, oh, okay. Well, let me think, and I think of like the F-117, and you think of how much effort would go into trying to figure out how are we going to pull that off, like, and how far and how long and all the secrecy that has to happen and how many probably test pilots died trying to get that thing to fly. Like, I'm just saying that maybe, I always want to say, is it just us? Maybe it is just our damn technology.
Oh, okay.
It is, so far in advance from where we think we are, because I keep coming back to those phrases like I'm so mad at myself, but like Lockheed Martin, the Skunk Works, I keep forgetting the other big company, but, McDonnell Douglas, a lot of them, they've changed or they've gotten eaten up by each other with mergers and that. But like the old school, the old guard that I remember I keep guarding myself. Oh, I don't know if they exist anymore. But the heads would say stuff like phrases that, and I'd take them at their word. Like they say, like, and they're on record. This is nothing new. Like one or two of them has said stuff like, what you see in Star Trek, or what we're doing now would blow George Lucas's mind. In other words, people that dream up Star Wars, like what we're doing, and they've said these things like 10, 15 years ago or more, 20, 25 years ago, they'd say these things. You're like, geez, maybe we are, doing stuff we just have no clue. But then I get a little mad at that going, but how is that though? Then we can't figure out, like with our silly pandemic that happened, or we got all these things that kind of, or just even other things that you think people are thinking about. And like even now here in the United States, I don't know if you're aware, like we can't get any eggs. We have no chicken eggs. So, stuff like that. You go, how does this stuff happen? But yet we think we've got high technology. We can't even grow goddamn chickens. And we've got, 15 different departments with thousands of people. And not one of them thought, gee, maybe we should figure out how to keep the chickens from getting flu. I mean, I'm sorry, I get cynical.
No, I don't know. I understand what you're saying. This leads me to this idea and questioning that I have, that it's been a while they've been working on the crafts they found or were given, and do you know? Oh my gosh, names! I should have prepared more. Do you know this?
Oh, that's the way I'm feeling, my man.
I think that interview. It's pretty old now. I think it was in the 80s or maybe more in the 90s. That's an old guy. I think he's wearing black glasses and he always have the cap on. Oh, his name almost got back to my memory, and he worked for the army, and his job was to design flight simulators.
Yes, I saw that. I knew this interview. Yes, I'm not going to get the name.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to get the name. I know who you mean, though.
Okay.
I know exactly who you mean.
So it's been a while already. This guy, oh, come on. This name is just at the tip of my tongue. But
he reckons 2025, by the way.
Yeah. Sorry?
I'm pretty sure he's the one he's one of those. There's multiple references. He's one of those that reference 2025.
I'm sure. So I have to watch it again. But
yeah, check that.
Bill U. House, I think his name was.
Bill U. House. I think you're right.
And so
this is where I wish I had another monitor, because I just don't want to mess this up. But I would do stuff over here if I had another monitor. So forgive me. Go ahead.
Okay. So he by the way, just confirmed what Bob Lazar was saying. Yes, we work at Bill U. House was working, I think, at S4. You know, Area 51, S4, and blah blah blah, all that stuff. And basically, the story is that they were given, I think, crafts or technology crafts, but not how they operated, and they had to figure out how it worked. But they had the help of EBE, extraterrestrial biological entities, I think it is.
Very good.
What was his name? Earl?
Well, it was something like Elon or Eban or something.
Eben. Yes, I think it was Eben, and I think his particular name was Earl or something, whatever. And he was wearing a shirt, but he was like a typical gray, but wearing a shirt and everything. But anyway, so they had a question like how this thing works. I'm stuck in the process of understanding. And as soon as they got this question in mind, they received telepathically the answer from Earl or whatever.
Yes.
So what I mean is that this story got out like decades ago. Decades ago, Bill U. House said, "Oh, we figured it out, and we've been around the solar system multiple times already, and even beyond that and everything." So it's very far-fetched. It's difficult to believe. But now, looking back, we hear all these constellation program and blah 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 blah. And if you pieces the things together, like, hey, I heard about that like decades ago. So is it just a repetition of the same lie that goes over and over? Because, to believe a lie, you have to tell the lie many, many times from different sources, and then it becomes real, So is it just a lie that each generation has to hear, or is it something consistent enough to show a picture? So, but here is my question. If that is true, and it's already been decades since we figure out and mastered that technology, where is it? We had conflicts. You mentioned some of them. With Russia now, there is a conflict and everything. And sometimes some people think, I don't think we are at this point, but some catastrophist people say that we are on the verge of World War III or whatever. Where is that technology that will make an end to all of this? Okay, they don't want to put it in the public domain because they are selfish, or probably more because we might, people with bad intention might use that technology to do something bad, so they prefer to be the only one to know how to use that technology, just like the atomic bomb. The USA was the first to create it, and then other countries wanted to have it, but the US, maybe except for Israel, they didn't want to help other countries to have it. And actually France, with the General de Gaulle, he wanted to know the technology. He wanted the Americans to explain the technology for France to be independent and not rely on the US. But of course, I think it was Kennedy said no, because if you get to have it and then another one wants to have it, and then it's all around and it's not a good thing. Yeah. But de Gaulle was so old-fashioned and very determined, and so that we got in through our own means, and finally France got it too. But this is the same story. Once you have something of such a power, you don't want it to be disseminated, not only because you're selfish, but also because it brings more risk, who's gonna
Right.
in what hand it's gonna end up, and what are they gonna do with it? You know, it's more risk to the world. So I understand that they keep that technology secret for that reason or other reasons, but when do they use that technology? You know, it seems that we never saw that technology even remotely to end any, or maybe it's so efficient that it actually ends the matter even before we know there is a matter. Or probably they don't use that technology here on Earth, but maybe somewhere else, because you have even more crazy stories around David Wilcock, I think his name is, and other
Okay.
guys, I forgot the name, but they say that actually we have bases on Mars, and we walk along with aliens and slave humans and stuff, or I don't know what's going on there. So, you know,
Right.
so, but what I'm saying is that if the skunk works figured out, and if what they say here and there, those quotations, I mean, those, quotations you said about, oh, you know, we can bring ET back home and stuff. Where is it?
Right.
Where is the use of this since all that time? So whether it's
I'm with
not
you.
true, or really we have to keep to the conclusion, wow, they are at at a level of selfishness or whatever motive that they manage all through those decades to really separate the world that we know and what they know. You know, so hermetical. What's the word? So
Yeah,
I'm
well,
wondering,
yeah,
what's your idea?
I mean, it's weird because I personally am always trying to feel like I'm an optimist in the sense, like folks like yourself with your art of your photography and your video work, and I watch that and I'm amazed. I mean, I really do get enjoyment out of it, and I feel that about art in general, or just music and compositions, and there's so much wonderful things that humans have done, and we are appreciative of things like that, or some of us are. But I have also, I feel like it very rarely do folks at our level, and I say like most people, ever get a flavor or a taste of what and when I say rich, I mean the super, super rich. And we can dream and you can watch things. The super rich, the super, super, super rich, you never see. You never see. And we think we're seeing opulence and extravagance when you watch things in Monte Carlo and you watch those ships or the yachts. The super ultra rich in that level. Imagine how, like, we've got more billionaires than ever before, and yet these people that I'm thinking are in the control of this are astronomically higher than that. And that is the thing we can't fathom. It's almost like the economy of scale, you know, where we can't fathom, you know, how many refrigerators in any given day are being purchased by humanity. You know, it's huge. You know, you think, oh, I don't know, maybe 10,000, you know, you find out it's 150,000 a day or something, you know, where you just can't go, oh my God, I can't believe that. The amount of money, and I'm going to share something again, and I always have to come back to my own personal experiences just because it's the only way I can try to understand things. Yeah, it's the only way. I mean, I can read all I want, and it just, you know, about opulence, or like even when we read history, you can't fathom, you know, armies of, you know, hundreds of thousands attacking one another, you know, back in the days of those heavy armaments. And, you know, we can't really fathom that. But I mean, when I think of just this little microcosm, so without giving away too much, we had the opportunity to just simply go into a hangar in the New York City area for airplanes and aircraft, for private airplanes, corporate aircraft. And I was just amazed at what you see, because you open up this, you go in there, and this was just one of, oh God, dozens of hangars, huge hangars, and whole entire 707s, 727s, giant Boeing aircraft that you and I would only see as passengers on an airplane, all in this hangar. And the most beautiful paint jobs. Not just one or two, but maybe three matching helicopters with the matching paint job, each of their own color schemes, and literally as far as you're walking, only as far as you can see. And it's just immense. Like when you see that kind of money, or you see the magnitude of these craft, and you're looking up and you're just walking along, and this is like you and I may be walking along at a used car lot, or like I'm trying to think in Japan what you would have where you might, where you just have bunches of stuff that we would just say, oh, yeah, it's just another, that's how it felt. And yet this is where the super rich keep some of their aircraft. And then the gentleman we were with was a pilot. He's a corporate pilot, a personal pilot for one of the wealthiest people on the earth. And again, I just don't want to go too far beyond that. And so he let us go aboard one of the man's planes, one of them, and it was the 707, I think. And this was the small one. It just boggles the mind when you go in, and it was the most opulently designed. I mean, it was like walking into the most miraculous palace in this airplane. Everything was gold plated. Everything was, and I sat for a moment, and the reason I bring is the weight of this. This was just a seat, a singular seat in this, and this wasn't even the guy's seat. This is like where the crew sits. And I sat in this leather seat and thought, this leather seat is the most comfortable seat I've ever been in my life. And it's just like one of the crew seats. And it's just nothing compared to all the beautiful things you're looking around at. And you're thinking, I bet this thing costs more than what I make just the seat in a year. See, I think we can't fathom the kind of wealth that some of these people make and have and control. And, and one side I respect it because, they're making decisions but they're thinking in a way that you and I just can't even consider. I don't think whether they know or they don't know, like we always say, like with Bezos, they were saying if he could just even give a small fraction of his daily wealth, he could have health insurance for all his employees, and yet he doesn't do it. Right. And, that's a proven fact. And they'll say, oh, no, it's a proven fact. Like literally, they say like what he makes like in an hour would pay for all the health care for all his employees, and they never have to have a premium. And it's just an astonishing concept that you and I would go, yeah, just do it. Do it. Give them health care. The fact that they don't, I hate to, what's the word? Demonize some of these people, but I do think either they just get to a different plane and they don't, and I think the more you're in it, the less you get there. And then if you're born into it and then you continue that, I just think they don't have a clue about how we consider and think. And so if you take that mindset and start realizing, it is almost a little like your famous countries, let them eat cake, like it's almost like the famous, line that, if they're starving, we'll let them eat cake. They don't have a clue that the people are living like we do.
Disconnected.
And I'm not defending it. I think it's just, but I think there's something to it. And then if if you're in the position that these people are that make call the shots, and you think of like the military industrial complex that, President Eisenhower warned of, saying it's the single greatest threat to democracy, I think he was spot on. And I think that's exactly what this is. It's like it's a complete and utter power grab. And if they've got a weapon that would end something, they go, you know what? We're going to keep that in our back pocket. And we're going to just keep going as is because we're making gobs and gobs of money producing, rounds of machine gun shells and all the traditional weaponry. And I think they don't give a rat's anything as long as they're making money, and they play both sides. Like these, they sell the armaments to both sides. That's the sad part, is that, we're kidding ourselves, but the reality is that they're all making money from both sides of conflicts. And I think it's a big part of this. And then maybe they could end it. But why? If it's a cash cow and they literally are turning on faucets and all it comes out is money, I hate to be so cynical, but I think that's what drives a lot of this. And it makes you sad because you go, well, then we're never going to fix it. I do have hope. Like I keep thinking of people that like these pilots, like the one that started but the one that started the organization, because he's just doing it kind of like you were saying. He's sort of dogmatically saying, I don't know what they are, but all I know is that if I'm a pilot and I'm flying, I don't want these things flying out of nowhere.
Right.
I don't care who's.
Right.
Yeah. And he's got an organization he had started. It's basically like a aviation safety, aviator safety thing, which is he really doesn't care whether they're extraterrestrial. Just we got to get control, or at least know where the hell they are, so we're not going to fly into them, because it's scary if you're the one charged with souls behind you while you're flying an aircraft, and this can or this ball or whatever comes flying out of nowhere. Well, damn it, we got to know where that is and have it not fly into one of our engines. And hey, I'm not convinced that's not what happened to that that Malaysian flight that went down. And I don't know, or did we get rid of it ourselves because it was carrying something like this? You can't help but be conspiratory about a lot of things when all this stuff kind of does seem a bit fishy, where you got $100 billion, multi-billion-dollar aircraft that just disappears in the Indian Ocean or wherever, and then you think, well, geez, maybe it hit one of these things, or
yeah,
I don't know.
So your conclusion is that they might have figured out that technology, but they don't want to use it to end any conflict because that's not big enough, or that's not their matter. And on the opposite, they make money out of conflicts, so it's good for them that there are conflicts or the need of weapons and munitions around the world. Okay, I understand that, but two things. One is that technology is so far beyond anything that we can imagine. I mean, it's like magic to us.
Right.
I think they want to do something with it. They cannot just, okay, we figure it out and we are sitting on it until something happens. I don't think so. If you have this technology at hand, you want to use it in a way or another. Maybe not for the public benefit, I understand. And maybe it's out there, out of anybody's eyes or radars or other enemy nations like China or Russia or whatever, But you cannot just sit on it once you figure out how it works, because it's so magical, you want to do something with it. That's one thing that I believe. So then, the conclusion will be that they've reached a level of carelessness about the rest of the world that we should put in our minds, to understand what's going on. And maybe one of the reasons of the disclosure not happening, that just like the analogy with the rich people, they are so disconnected to the rest of us that now that they've figured out such a technology that made a huge leap ahead of anything we know, that they just disconnected altogether. I mean, they're probably still physically here living on Earth and everything, but they just don't care about the rest of the world to such a level that, because if you have that technology and you never use it for whatever going on Earth, you must be like, so careless, I don't know.
I think as you're saying, I mean, you're spot on. I think I like how you always keep bringing us back to and as it got me thinking along the lines of, I'm trying to put myself in that, which sounds horrible to say because you and I think but I think the idea of selfishness on them, that's not even the concept. I mean, like, I think they feel they deserve what they've got and they don't even think of selfish. Like that's not, and it just got me thinking along lines here about here in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area. We're known for, have you ever heard of Amway?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a big, what they call multi-level marketing. It's the one that started the idea of, it's almost less about the products and it's more about getting more people to sell the product, but it's not really about the product, and you make the money because you're getting more people to sell the product. But it's like some will say a pyramid scheme. Like the people at the top make the money, but everyone else just, though I really hate to knock them, because it's ingenious and they came up with it. They designed it. These two guys, Van Andel and Barb's going to kill me because I can't remember it. But it's like not knowing who founded this area, basically. Grand Rapids wouldn't exist for these two families that made their money from Amway. Van Andels and whoever the other ones are, the other big family. I bring it up because one of them had parents that died of cancer. or both parents that had cancer. Well, because they've got such wealth, there's this Van Andel Institute, and it's this giant building that was built in downtown Grand Rapids. Beautiful looking, it's futuristic looking, it's beautiful. And they do like some of the most cutting edge medical science and studies. Barbara has gone through cancer. I think, at some point we were approached and they donated her tissue to them to help study it. And, it's all for good. So I think that's great. That's where money and I think goes well. But it's because someone in their family got cancer, died of cancer, that they put this money, said, and I like it that they were, by God, we're going to try to figure this out. All for it. But they do a lot of other good things. The whole city is named after these two families, and they do the theaters, you name it, all the good stuff. But it makes me realize I don't think a lot of these super rich, maybe they probably do have philanthropic things. I can't doubt that they probably do, but the extraterrestrial or the technology we're talking of, I could see where if you said, like if you and I were at that level and I were to say, I make money because I'm invested in all of the things, and conflicts, if it's the good guys or the bad guys, I don't care. I make money. So as long as it doesn't impact me, and I've got my islands or I've got my places and I've got my own little armies and whatever else that protect me and my family, and I can fly anywhere I want in the world at the drop of a hat, and that's how I live. I got my yachts and whatever else. If I've got that technology, I wouldn't be surprised. I might be saying, so you're telling me this is also kind of a time-space thing, and that space travel involves time travel, because it's all intertwined, gravity and all this. Because I always hear you can't travel big distances without warping time and warping. So you're kind of, people that live at high altitudes are, aging slower or faster? I always forget, there's a measurable thing. Like you age differently based on the speed at which you travel. I could see them saying, I don't want this to end, or I want to elongate my life. I'm going to be flying in this super fast UFO that we've got, and I'll see you in another millennia. And off you go. I could see that. In other words, these people may be thinking like, I've got it's kind of like, think what they do with their yachts and their super yachts. Well, this is the ultimate super yacht that you can say, hey, me and my family, we're good because I don't want them getting cancer, and we can go to, Alpha Centauri, and they've got a certain element there that you just hang out there for a while and it kills all the cancer cells. I mean, that's getting really zany, I realize, but I'm just trying to think, I could see us thinking that way, or we have an alliance with these people, and as long as we keep them and they need fresh water or whatever it is they need maybe from us, hey, we can give you water. My family, I want to just make sure they're set up and they're saying, okay, well, we know how to deal with these things. I don't know. It's just like, it's kind of like you look at how the rich act right now. They build institutions to build, or they fly themselves or their family. They've got the wherewithal to go to the best doctors and the best surgeons. Well, why wouldn't they do the same thing if they've got that at their disposal? And if you're the powerful person that knows how to use this, I could see that being reality. I mean, it makes me think of like the Illuminati. You hear about all these, like, supposedly the power structure that's maybe existed throughout human history that they say, might exist. Maybe it does exist, maybe this is a time traveling thing even, maybe they've been doing this.
I understand, but from reasoning, from the few informations we have and trying to put them together to get an understanding, we might need to get to the conclusion that they are so disconnected. It's not greed, it's not selfishness, it's something else. But factually, it really is. What is the contrary of beneficial?
The contrary of beneficial, detrimental. You mean
detrimental? It's detrimental to us because if we had that technology, just like Greer says, if we had that technology, we wouldn't get rid of the petrol and the diseases and all this stuff. So it's detrimental in that regard, in that way, So
right.
we just should try to figure out what is preventing the disclosure from happening. And if it's such a level of disconnection, I'm going to call it like that, that it means something, you know, and it means that we have to, you know, we won't get anything from them, and we have to somehow get there, or get some of their elements to get out of, you know, to realize how harmful it is for humanity as a whole. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, why they don't disclose, and I have many different scenarios, ideas about that. But if it's because they are so disconnected, I don't know if we can bring them back to the reality of the rest of us. Does it make sense?
I get it. It makes sense. And, you know, I think I always come back to history. Like, I keep thinking we exist, and we seem to, like they always say, history repeats itself. And I keep thinking about how, and this is not a slight, you know, against the Catholic Church, because I feel like of all the religions, at least the Catholic Church is the ones that usually set up like places to help the poor and help, you know, like they actually seem to go out of their way to put themselves into some pretty crappy places to help feed people or to help. So I hate to diss them, but there's no questioning that, you know, the Catholic Church knew that the, you know, that the earth revolved around the sun for hundreds and hundreds of years, because their own astronomers figured it out with the help, you know, Copernicus and Galileo and, you know, all these things. But the Catholic Church knew, without doubt. They've said that, and they kept it secret for hundreds and hundreds of years to not let that cat out of the bag, that, you know, by golly, everything revolves around the earth, and don't you forget it. And they did that knowing that they didn't want to give up that power and that money. And you know, you go to those cathedrals and you realize the gold platedness, and you need those rabble to come in every Sunday and drop their coin, even though they can barely feed themselves. And yet, you know, in the end, these bishops and these higher ups, cardinals, they were living pretty high in the hog. And, you know, I think it's just human darn nature that if you've got access to the thing that most people don't, you're going to probably take advantage of it and keep it secret, keep it yourself. I hate to feel that way, but it's almost like people like us, we almost have to think that way and say, well, what did they used to do? Well, this is what they used to do. And I think we're at that point with this. I think it's in the same realm, unfortunately, you know, and people are going to die of diseases that, you know, you probably could solve. And people are going to be going without fresh water that, you know, you could solve. And people are not going to have, you know, people would argue that the Americans have been doing that forever with, you know, third world nations, you know, not having a electricity or generator to save a child from malaria or something. And we're living like, you know, going to the movies and the drive-ins and, you know, bebopping on the 50s. And yet, you know, I mean, we could argue the same kind of thing, but I think it's kind of, like you're saying, it's such a darn. You can't talk about one thing without almost talking about the big picture of humanity. That's what's so frustrating. It's like and I think that's why I like Danny Sheehan's mindset, which is almost like he's like you. He is, because he kind of brings you back to like, look, okay, here's what we know, or here's what if this, then we need to at least be able to do this. And if it's this, we need to at least, in the end, kind of get our house in order, or get our human family in order, and think along the lines like, if it does happen, if this does, how are we going to? Are we going to all just go crazy in the streets and, you know, scream and yell? And, you know, like, I think I'm glad there's rational people like you and Danny Sheehan, or at least thinking along the lines. Because me, I'm often, look at me, I'm off in the weeds all the time. So I'm sorry for.
No, I don't. I think
but I think it does tie into this big picture. It's hard to talk about this without pulling it all in.
Yes.
It shows it's the single. Like my wife will in the mornings read about what's going on politically and get all worked up, and I kind of look at, when you deal with this, I like it better, to be honest, because it's sort of like, it's going to be nothing after 4 years, or after, you know, it's going to be the next name that comes along and whatever their motive, and frankly, see how that ties in again. You kind of go, everybody's in it for themselves. Like, whether you like it or not, all of us have some sort of what's in it for me. And that you put that in the right power somewhere else, and you go, yeah, I think this is why we're at where we're at. I come back to these simple stories that I just find mesmerizing. And it, to me, like, it gets back to what you're saying about facts. Just give me the facts, like the old Dragnet show. Just the facts, man. And I listen to these guys, like there's one in particular, and I don't know if you've ever gone to have you ever gone to archive.gov? Have you ever gone to the archive.gov? It's the U.S. archives. And what I find fascinating is that it doesn't, number one, have very many subscribers, I think, given it's a government entity. I think it is, here I'm saying, but I don't think you can get a .gov willy-nilly. I think you have to have some. So I think it's the U.S. Archive. Now that I'm saying them, I got to be awful if maybe I've been just sucked into something, but I think it's archive.gov. You go out there, they have interviews that go back. Some are in the 70s, some are in the 80s, and you're watching, and they've got a fair number of them that are UFO related and alien related, which I think is fascinating because they don't have a lot out there, but yet they have a fair amount, at least a dappling of those, which I think is interesting of itself. But they've got interviews, if maybe you've watched them, but there's the one I find just mesmerizing. There's two of them, but there's one where it's the mortician from Roswell. And he is such, and I know, you almost want to say, you probably know these guys. You watch it and go, I know a guy like that. I don't think he's faking it. He's not someone who would fake it. Maybe it's just me, but I mean, I've been around some rural areas similar to what he's talking about, and the way he talks, his demeanor, his mentality. Because you and I was saying, oh my God, if I heard about an alien or something, I'd be like, whereas he's just sort of like, he's probably gutted deer and whatever else, and you're a mortician, so you're excising fluids out of dead bodies on a regular basis, and just another day in the life. It's like, and yet he looked like he's wearing like a cap, and he looks like a farmer or a rancher. You watch that interview, and I defy you to say you think he's making it up, because he's just portraying the story as he saw it, as he experienced it. And then at the end, the best part is because they're fiddling with his mic at times, because you can tell it's not like, it's almost like the raw footage. They're the sound guys over, because he kept going like this and knocking the mic, and they're like, sorry about that, it's legit, right? And this guy at the end says something like almost like could I get a copy of that? Like he wanted, like it's almost like my daughter would probably like to hear this. It doesn't sound like someone that's trying to make it up and be like, I want to be famous, because it was like they brought him and said, well, we've cut the tape, or it's just, and he kind of is almost like a little kid at him, like, well, maybe my daughter might like a copy of that, and I think this is legit. And the guy talks, and I'm sorry, but the way he describes certain fellows that he had to come across, it's got racial undertone, because at one point, for the era, there's a black sergeant or someone, and then he makes a comment to him that's clearly not anywhere good, in today's standards of political correctness, and not even political, just good decency to human type, but it was still that racial undertone. It's legit as far as I'm concerned. It is absolutely the real McCoy. And I listen to that, and then you tie that with these other stories about like the daughter. It would be like my 8-year-old story of that. We know what we know. We saw what we saw. And they have these stories where, the sheriff came in and he dumped all this stuff out or whatever, and it's from the crash site. And, they saw it, and it was on, and they crumpled it up, and it opened it up, and it wasn't a weather balloon, right? And they all admit it. It's those things that bring me back to saying, okay, I think it's a real thing. Like, I think the nucleus and the genesis of all of whatever happened with the technology, I think it's legit. And I don't know whether what Bob Lazar says, how we've had things from like 12,000 years ago or whatever, from archaeological digs or whatever. I can't, but I take that one little Roswell incident and the fact that he absolutely was there and talks about, and then if you go and talk, there's another interview on that archive.gov, who it's a boy who would have been probably my age, like 7 or 8 years old, showing up, and he's describing what he saw of this crash site, and describe everything about it. Sounds too freaking legit, because it's, we were trying to help him, and this was super cold, and like touching this, and you could see a gash in the side of this. I think it's legit. I think it's just too far gone. Then you tie in Danny Sheehan saying that he got called by President Clinton, or calls in calls in Bush, who was formed to be President Bush. George H. Bush was the head of CIA during Jimmy Carter's. He refused to give Jimmy Carter the debriefing on UFOs. He refused. So Jimmy Carter had to go to the science person, the science department, head, and she hires Danny Sheehan, and I think he's legit because he's like the general counsel for the Jesuit, which are the division of the Catholic Church. So he would have no reason, like none of these people have any reason to lie about it. And then he's the one that says he went to the building on Madison in Washington, D.C. had just been built and knew that they openly had Project Blue Book, and there were 700 and some cases that couldn't be answered out of the thousands that they did investigate. And, he said he saw the pictures. He saw pictures of the crash site. And I'm not going to deny, I can't. Yes, you'd say, well, clearly it was or they put that there. He says that it didn't look to him like anything you could have posed. Like he knows, he's no dum-dum. We didn't have that kind of CGI stuff or whatever back in that time. And so I think it's legit. Oh, and I might add too, I wrote, when about my story, I forgot to add, I wrote President Carter because President Carter, one of his campaign promises back in the mid-70s was he was going to disclose everything he could about UFOs. After our incident, I heard that, and I could, when you're a kid, who cares about politics? Boring, 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 and oh my God, I was like, God, is this still? And then, we had 3 channels, and all 3 of them would be showing some stupid presidential debate or anything. You're like, oh, this sucks. You can't watch Columbo or anything. And I heard him say, I was playing with my Matchbox cars and something on the floor, and I heard President Carter say something. I went, and I looked at the TV and went, and I begged and pleaded with my parents, said, who are you going to vote for? Who are you going to vote for? Because my dad was probably a tried and true Republican, ironically, even though they're educators, and my mom was probably a Democrat. But my dad, I remember working on him saying, God, please vote for Carter, because he's going to. And so I don't know, my parents didn't say. They were still quiet about who they voted for. Carter got into office. I'm like, oh, great, here we go. Nothing. And we didn't know these stories that I just was telling you about how we heard from Danny Sheehan. I didn't know any of that until now. So that's why it was really interesting. But I think it was probably in late 76, still nothing. And I figured, well, wait a minute. 77, he was probably in office now for a while. And I'm like, where is it? So I got mad and I wrote a letter to President Carter. And I was so mad. I wanted to have that for our talk because I wanted to show you. I don't know where I've got it. It's not lost. It's just some box somewhere in my basement. I got a reply, not from President Carter. So in fact, I wish I'd had a letter. I mean, maybe my mom might have, we didn't have scans like we do now, but mimeographed or something. Maybe she did. I doubt it. But I had handwritten very carefully a letter to President Carter. I got a letter back, and it was and I think it was a pretty high. It was like the Joint Chief of Staff. It was some big name, like either the U.S. Air Force, Secretary of the Air Force, or some big name. They replied. So I was impressed. I think my dad was really impressed, because he's like, you're never going to hear anything. And it's basically, it was a feel-good letter of, in essence, Project Blue Book. And I think it was kind of trying to say that, it did exist, which is funny because I think I'd heard recently they'd always been denying it. And here I had a letter that was basically from the Secretary of Air. I didn't know that was secret, but now I found Project Blue Book is a thing, and that it's being worked on by like top people. Blah blah. It was a very basic, platitude-ish type letter, and then I think at some point there was a television program called Project Blue Book. I don't know if you know that, but it was like in the 70s, mid or late 70s or something. There was a show called Project Blue Book, and it was like a Hollywood produced television show, weekly show, and it was almost like a Dragnet type of thing where they would have the person go through each one, and they always ended up with being debunked this, or swamp gas, or whatever. Not quite X-Files, but I remember, and anyway, I've got that letter somewhere. But again, it shows though how long this has been going on. So yeah. I think it's just remarkable. Gosh, you must be getting so late there. I'm sorry that this is.
No worries. I feel bad for Sarah because she's been asking me to go for her walk. So we've been talking for a while, 2 hours, 25 minutes. How about we do it again at another time to continue the conversation? Are you?
Yes. I'm sorry this has gone so long as it is. I enjoyed it though. It's
no worries.
It's really great.
It was fun.
Barbara doesn't like to go this deep into any of this sort of like, it's not that it's like I think she's more pragmatic about it. It's like, well, what can you do?
Yes, yes. In the end, right? But anyway,
were you able to record this then?
I recorded. I'm gonna stop the recording right now.